There are places where the past refuses to stay buried, where the boundary between what was and what is becomes as thin as morning mist. Cape Mercy Lighthouse, perched on the jagged cliffs of the Maine coast, was such a place. Built in 1847, it had watched over treacherous waters for over a century, its beams sweeping across the dark Atlantic like a searching eye. This story begins with a discovery. In 2003, during renovations of the lighthouse, now a maritime museum, workers found a metal box sealed behind a false panel in the keeper's quarters. Inside was a leather-bound logbook, its pages brittle with age and salt air. The official lighthouse logs from 1952 to 1953 were stored in maritime archives, neat and bureaucratic. This book was different. It belonged to Thomas Waite, lighthouse keeper from March 1952 to October 1953. The Coast Guard records show he resigned his position for personal reasons and moved to Arizona, as far from the ocean as one could get. He never spoke about his time at Cape Mercy. He died in 1987, taking his secrets with him. Until now. March 15th, 1952. Today I took possession of Cape Mercy Light. The previous keeper, Samuel Holbrook, left in quite a hurry. His replacement was supposed to arrive 2 weeks ago but never showed. They were desperate enough to offer the position to me, a man with no lighthouse experience, but a steady hand and a need for solitude. The quarters are small but adequate. Kitchen, bedroom, and a small study where I'll keep my instruments and logs. The lighthouse itself is a beauty. 90 feet of whitewashed stone, spiral stairs that seem to climb into the clouds. The lens room at the top is all glass and brass, the Fresnel lens catching every bit of available light and throwing it 20 miles out to sea. Holbrook left everything in order. Too much order, perhaps. Every book lined up precisely, every tool in its place, every surface scrubbed clean. In the study, I found his personal log, separate from the official record. The last entry, dated March 1st, contained only 4 words: "Don't trust the fog." Cryptic. The Coast Guard inspector said Holbrook had become unreliable toward the end. When I pressed him for details, he simply said that isolation affects some men more than others. He assured me that the lighthouse is entirely safe, that the equipment is sound, that I have nothing to worry about. Why then did he seem so eager to leave before sunset? March 22nd, 1952, a week of routine. The weather has been clear, the mechanism runs smoothly, the radio works perfectly. I've fallen into the rhythm of lighthouse life: maintenance in the morning, weather reports at noon, light inspection before dusk, keeping watch through the night. The beam sweeps, 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 a steady pulse against the darkness. The locals in Mercy Harbor are friendly but distant. They bring supplies once a week. Betty from the general store, old Frank who runs the fishing co-op. They're polite, but they don't linger. When I mentioned Holbrook, Betty's smile faded. "Sam was a good man," she said. 20 years he kept that light. Then last winter, something changed. He started talking about things in the water, things in the fog. "What things?" I asked. She wouldn't say. Just handed me my groceries and left quicker than usual. March 30th, 1952. The fog came last night. I've seen fog before. Grew up in San Francisco, where it rolls in like a living thing. But this was different. It didn't drift in from the sea. It simply appeared at exactly 2:47 a.m. as if someone had thrown a switch. One moment, clear sky and stars reflected on calm water. The next, a wall of gray so thick I couldn't see the rocks below the lighthouse. The beam cut through it, barely. Usually, the light reaches clear to the horizon. Last night, it stopped after maybe 50 feet, swallowed by the gray. And I heard something. At first, I thought it was the foghorn, an automatic reflex when visibility drops below a quarter mile. But the foghorn has a deep, resonant blast. This was different, higher pitched, almost musical, like someone blowing across the mouth of a bottle, but enormous, echoing across the water. It came from the direction of Widow's Rock, a nasty outcrop about 200 yards offshore. Ships have been wrecking on those rocks since colonial times. The lighthouse was built specifically because of them. The sound continued for 3 hours. Then, at 5:47 a.m., exactly 3 hours after it began, the fog vanished as suddenly as it had appeared. Dawn broke clear and cold. The ocean was empty. I checked the official log. Should I record this? I decided to keep it to my personal journal instead. Don't want the Coast Guard thinking I'm going the way of Holbrook. April 5th, 1952. The fog came again. Same time, 2:47 a.m. Same disappearance, 5:47 a.m. Same sound from Widow's Rock. This time, I was prepared. I took my binoculars to the lens room and watched the rocks carefully. The beam swept across them every 30 seconds, and in those brief moments of illumination, I searched for the source of the sound. Nothing. Just rocks and spray and fog. But here's what troubles me. When the beam passed over Widow's Rock, I could swear I saw something moving, not floating debris or seals, something large, shifting in the water between the rocks, dark and massive, but every time the light came back around, there was nothing there. 3 hours, always, exactly 3 hours. April 13th, 1952. I went into town today to research. The Mercy Harbor Historical Society occupies a small building next to the church. The curator, a woman named Margaret Stern, seemed surprised to see me. "You're the new lighthouse keeper," she said. It wasn't a question. I asked about the history of Widow's Rock, about shipwrecks, about the lighthouse itself. She brought me old newspapers, maritime records, and a book of local legends. The rocks got their name from a tragedy in 1693. A ship called the Mercy, yes, the town is named after it, wrecked there during a storm. 73 souls lost. The legend says the captain's wife had a premonition and begged him not to sail, but he ignored her. She stood on the cliffs and watched the ship break apart on the rocks. She waited there for 3 days, hoping for survivors. Then she walked into the ocean. "They say she's still waiting," Margaret told me. "That on foggy nights you can hear her calling to the lost sailors." "A woman's voice?" I asked. "No," she said, looking at me carefully. "A horn. A ship's horn." The Mercy was trying to signal for help when it went down. The horn kept blowing even as the ship sank. 3 hours, they say, until the water finally silenced it. I felt cold, despite the warm afternoon. "What happened to Holbrook?" I asked. "The previous keeper?" Margaret hesitated. "Sam became obsessed. He started keeping strange records, tracking the fog. He claimed it wasn't natural, that it came on a schedule. He said things were repeating." "What things?" "He never said. But in his last weeks, he would row out to Widow's Rock during the day, looking for something. One day, he came back different, wouldn't talk about what he'd found. A week later, he left. April 20th, 1952. The fog has come 3 more times, always the same schedule. I've been tracking it carefully. It appears every 8 days at 2:47 a.m. and vanishes at 5:47 a.m. The horn sound from Widow's Rock is constant during those 3 hours. I've made a decision. Next time the fog comes, I'm going to row out to the rocks. I need to see what's there. April 28th, 1952. Tonight is the night. I've prepared the rowboat, flashlight, rope, and my camera. The official log is up to date. If something happens to me, at least there will be a record. I keep thinking about Holbrook, about how he came back different. What did he see out there? The fog should arrive in 2 hours. April 29th, 1952, 3:15 a.m. I'm writing this by flashlight, sitting in the rowboat, wedged between 2 rocks, about 20 yards from Widow's Rock. My hands are shaking. From cold or fear, I'm not sure. The fog arrived on schedule. I launched the boat at 2:50 a.m. as soon as I could confirm the pattern was holding. The lighthouse beams swept overhead, useless in the thick gray. I navigated by compass and by memory, counting my strokes. The horn sound was much louder out here, not coming from the rocks themselves, but from below them, from the water. I reached Widow's Rock at 3:10. The rocks form a rough semicircle, creating a kind of pool in the center. The water there is usually turbulent, full of rip currents. But tonight it was still, perfectly still, like glass, and I could see through it. The water is maybe 30 feet deep here. The lighthouse beam, sweeping overhead every 30 seconds, would briefly illuminate what lay beneath. At first, I couldn't process what I was seeing. Then, piece by piece, the image formed. A ship. The Mercy, I'm certain of it, sitting upright on the bottom, almost perfectly preserved. But that's impossible. The ship went down in 1693. Wood doesn't last 3 centuries underwater. But there it was, and every 30 seconds, when the lighthouse beam swept across, I could see more details. The masts still standing, the sails somehow still attached, hanging limp in the water. The portholes dark and empty, except for one. In the captain's quarters, if I'm reading the ship's structure correctly, there was a light. A warm, yellow light, like a lantern. And in that light, I saw a silhouette, a figure standing at the window, looking up, looking at me. The horn sound suddenly made sense. It wasn't coming from the ship's horn. It was coming from the ship itself, from the air trapped inside, escaping through cracks and gaps, pushed out by something moving inside the hull. I should have left then. But the scientist in me, the part that needs to understand, made me wait for the next sweep of the lighthouse beam. When it came, the figure was gone from the window, and the ship's deck was no longer empty. There were people on it, dozens of them, standing perfectly still, all looking up at me. Sailors in period clothing, their faces pale and expressionless. And walking among them, moving toward the bow, was a woman in a long dress, her hair flowing in water that wasn't moving. She reached the bow, looked up, raised one arm and pointed, not at me, past me, at the lighthouse. I turned. The lighthouse beam was behaving strangely. Instead of sweeping in its regular pattern, it had stopped. It was pointing straight down, illuminating the water directly below the lighthouse itself. And I saw what was there. The ocean floor beneath the lighthouse is deeper, maybe 60 feet, and it's not floor. It's a field of shipwrecks, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all arranged in a pattern radiating out from a central point, all perfectly preserved, all with lights in their windows. The lighthouse isn't warning ships away from the rocks. It's marking something, drawing them in. I'm rowing back now. The fog is still thick, but I can see the lighthouse beam. It's moving again, sweeping in its normal pattern, as if nothing happened. But I know what I saw. I understand why Holbrook left. May 3rd, 1952. I've spent the last 4 days in the archives, the Mercy Harbor Historical Society, the Coast Guard records, old newspapers, ship manifests. Margaret has been helping me, though she's frightened by what we're finding. The pattern goes back to the lighthouse's construction in 1847. Every 8 days for over a century, ships have disappeared near Cape Mercy. Not wrecked, disappeared. Here one moment, gone the next. Always during fog, always between 2:47 and 5:47 a.m. The official records are sanitized, lost at sea, presumed sunk, missing. But local accounts tell a different story. Witnesses describing ships simply vanishing, rescue parties finding no wreckage, no survivors, no debris. 73 ships in 105 years, the exact number of souls lost on the Mercy. I found Holbrook's research too, hidden in Margaret's files. He'd figured it out. The lighthouse was built on the spot where the captain's wife walked into the ocean. The foundation goes down 60 feet, anchored in bedrock. But Holbrook's measurements showed something else. There's a cavity beneath the lighthouse, a massive hollow space in the rock shaped by centuries of tidal erosion, a cave system that extends out to Widow's Rock. And at certain times, when tidal forces align with other factors Holbrook couldn't quite explain, the cave resonates, creates a sound that carries across the water. A siren song. Ships hear it in the fog. They turn toward it, thinking they're hearing a distress signal. But they're heading for the rocks, guided by the lighthouse beam that should be saving them. Holbrook wrote, "The lighthouse doesn't just mark the danger. It's part of it. We're not keeping ships safe. We're feeding the rocks." May 10th, 1952. The fog came again last night. I didn't go out to the rocks this time. I stayed in the lens room and watched. At 2:47 a.m., the fog appeared. At 2:53 a.m., a yacht appeared on the radar. Small craft, probably running overnight from Portland to Boston. They were heading too close to shore. I tried to radio them. No response. I tried the foghorn, extra blasts to warn them off. They kept coming. At 3:15 a.m., they were close enough that I could see their running lights through the fog. They were heading straight for Widow's Rock, and then the lighthouse beam changed. It's automatic, controlled by a clockwork mechanism and a photoelectric sensor. It shouldn't be possible to alter its rotation, but the beam slowed, stopped, pointed directly at the yacht. I ran down the stairs, tried to shut off the mechanism. The switch wouldn't move. The gears kept turning, but the beam stayed fixed. Through my binoculars, I watched the yacht turn, heading straight into the beam, straight toward the rocks. I could see people on deck, a family, parents, and 2 children. They were looking at the lighthouse, smiling, waving, thinking they were safe. I screamed at them, though they couldn't possibly hear me. At 3:47 a.m., the yacht struck Widow's Rock. No explosion, no dramatic breaking apart. It simply stopped, settled into the water. The light stayed on for maybe 30 seconds. Then it sank, straight down, impossibly fast, as if something were pulling it under. At 5:47 a.m., the fog cleared. I used the binoculars to scan the area. No wreckage, no oil slick, no bodies. Nothing but water and rocks, as if the yacht had never existed. 74 ships now. May 15th, 1952. I've made my decision. I'm reporting the lighthouse as non-functional and calling for an emergency replacement keeper. I've documented everything in the official logs, mechanical failures, structural concerns, anything to justify shutting it down temporarily. Margaret is helping me contact families of people lost at sea near Cape Mercy. We're going to make noise, get investigators here. Maybe if enough attention is focused on this place, the pattern will be broken. Or maybe it won't matter. Maybe the lighthouse is just a symptom, not the cause. May 30th, 1952. The Coast Guard inspector came today. I showed him the mechanical issues I documented. He was skeptical, but agreed to authorize a temporary shutdown for repairs. The lighthouse went dark tonight for the first time in 105 years. I'm watching from the lens room now, even though the light is off. It's 2:47 a.m. The fog should come in 13 minutes. I need to see what happens without the light. May 30th, 1952, 3:15 a.m. The fog came. But something is different. Without the lighthouse beam, the fog is thicker, darker. It's not just obscuring the view, it's pushing in, pressing against the glass of the lens room, condensing on the windows in patterns that look almost like hands. The horn sound from Widow's Rock is louder. And there are other sounds now. Voices, dozens of them calling out in the fog, sailors' voices shouting orders, women screaming, children crying, the sounds of 74 ships dying. And beneath it all, one voice, clear and terrible, a woman weeping. The glass is cracking. June 1st, 1952. I turned the lighthouse back on. I had to. When the glass began to crack, when I heard that weeping, I ran down and manually engaged the mechanism. The lens began to turn, the beam cut through the fog, and everything stopped. The voices, the weeping, the pressure on the glass. The fog remained until 5:47 a.m., but it was just fog again. I understand now what Holbrook understood. The lighthouse isn't feeding the rocks. It's holding something back, something that's been there since 1693, waiting, hungry. The ships that vanish, they're not destroyed. They're taken, pulled into whatever place that woman's grief created. A pocket of frozen time where the Mercy is always sinking, where those 73 souls are always drowning. And every 8 days, when the tides align and the cave resonates, that place gets a little closer to ours. The fog is the boundary between worlds. The lighthouse beam is what keeps that boundary closed, mostly. Sometimes, when the grief is too strong, when the calling is too loud, ships still slip through. The lighthouse can't save them all, but if the light goes out completely, if the beam stops turning, the boundary will collapse. And everything that's been waiting in that frozen moment, 150 years of drowned sailors, of lost ships, of accumulated sorrow and rage, will come flooding back into our world. October 15th, 1953. My replacement arrives tomorrow. A young man from Connecticut, eager and confident. The Coast Guard assured him the lighthouse is routine, that the previous keeper just needed a change of scenery. I've left him my personal log, hidden behind the same false panel where I found Holbrook's warning. Maybe he'll find it. Maybe he won't. Maybe he'll be strong enough to last longer than I did, or maybe he'll do what I should have done. Blow the whistle, demand a full investigation, risk his career and reputation to tell the truth. But I don't think so. Because I understand now what keeps us quiet. It's not fear of being called crazy. It's the horrible, crushing knowledge that the lighthouse must stay lit. No matter the cost, no matter how many ships slip through, 78 ships now, 4 more since May, 4 more since I turned the light back on. I'm moving to Arizona, somewhere dry, far from the ocean, somewhere I won't hear that weeping in my dreams, somewhere the fog can't reach. But I know the truth. Distance doesn't matter. Once you've heard her calling, once you've seen what waits in the water, you carry it with you. The ocean always remembers. And so do we. Author's note. The metal box containing Thomas Waite's log also held something else. A letter, dated 1987, written in shaky handwriting. Thomas Waite's last words, "To whoever finds this, I kept my silence for 34 years. I told myself I was protecting people, that the truth would cause panic, that some things are better left unknown. But silence has its own cost. 78 became 112. The lighthouse keepers keep the light burning, but they don't know why. They think it's superstition, tradition, pride in their work. They don't know they're wardens of a prison, guardians of a boundary that should never have been crossed. I'm dying now. Lung cancer. But before I go, I wanted someone to know. The lighthouse still stands, the light still turns, and every 8 days, when the fog comes, ships still vanish. Cape Mercy Lighthouse is automated now. No keeper is needed. Computers and solar panels and backup generators ensure the light never stops. But machinery breaks, storms knock out power, and someday, inevitably, the light will fail. When it does, we'll learn what a century and a half of grief looks like when it finally breaks free. God help us all. Cape Mercy Lighthouse still operates today, fully automated. The Coast Guard maintains it regularly. Tourist boats pass by in summer, and visitors take pictures from the shore. Every 8 days, fog rolls in at 2:47 a.m., and if you listen carefully, beneath the foghorn's mechanical blast, you might hear something else. Something that sounds almost like weeping, almost like a ship's horn echoing from very far away. Sleep well, dear listener. The light is still burning. For now.